This is edition 1 of the Blacksmithing Technique Sessions, the Miner's Candlestick, module number 2. The Blacksmithing Technique Sessions are an audio-visual interview with a blacksmith talking through their method of making a featured forged metal piece while viewing step-by-step photos of their techniques. The following sequence is an audio-visual interview with Mark Aspery and Patti, talking through Mark's personal method of making the Miner's Candlestick, and this is module 2, where you will learn how to forge the hook, create the 3 upset corners, and some more cutting and shouldering. A special thank you to Mark Aspery and his devotion in cultivating the craft of blacksmithing through his many endeavors. All of the photo credits go to Mark Aspery. He took them all. And a big thank you to the first edition sponsor, the Artist Blacksmith Association of North America, ABANA, the nonprofit organization dedicated to preserving the craft of blacksmithing.
So here I am. I've got a round fuller. It's a fairly sharp round fuller. I'm going to say the end of the fuller is probably 1/8. Mine's curved because I use that fuller for split material. And typically I might have to get round something that's top of the cut. Not so in this case. But I'm just driving that into the bottom of the cut. Because typically when we have a cut, it's rather like the web in between your fingers. You know, it cuts nicely at the top, but you've got a little bit of something at the bottom, that flap of skin.
Right,
and you need,
here.
exactly, right there. And we need to make that all one level, if you will. So I'm driving it in, I'm trying to make the end of the cut half round, and I'm trying to level the cut.
So this is doing several things at once.
Right, and then you'll also notice I'm protecting the bar from being cut at the back by the jaws of the vise by putting in a backing plate, as I call it. And then I've got a piece of angle iron in front that has a radius very similar to the radius of the near side edge or the offside edge of my anvil. Those bits that you grind away when you buy a new anvil, because we're going to be forging there.
And this is one piece as well.
It's a piece of angle iron welded onto a piece of 1/4 inch 4x4.
Just for a backing plate. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Interesting. Next slide.
You can see now I've just pulled down the hook material, maybe pulled it and hit it with the pin of my hammer or something like that. But I'm trying to get it as close to 90 degrees as I can. And you can see that piece of angle iron is really acting as to soften the transition there. If I relied on the sharp jaws of the vise, I would have a sharp transition there. And again, sharp transitions, not so good in this particular environment because we're going to be manipulating this, and sharp transitions are cracks.
And hopefully this is all in one heat as well.
Yes. But again, if you need to take two, take two. We're asking a lot of the material by trying to open it out to 90 degrees. So if you're feeling like it's resisting you or you're putting too much effort in, time to take another heat.
Are you hammering on the top?
No, I'm just pulling down by hand.
You're just pulling as a
although
lever.
That fuller actually could go away and I could use a hammer to tap it down, but just light blows. But again, if it's down in the low reds, time to take another heat because it will tear rather than bend.
Now I'm seeing a little bit of a space here, like it's pulling off of the back plate, probably as you're pulling this down. Is that a problem?
No, not at all.
Okay, so that could be corrected if... Yeah.
Oh, absolutely, yes.
Okay. Next slide.
This is the result as we left the vise, and I'm going to put in what I'm going to call as a convenience bend. And so I'm going to bend the bar in a very general loop, not a tight loop, and that will put that hook material, the bit that's vertical in the slide, into more of a forging plane. At this stage, it's perpendicular to a forging plane for me. I'm holding on to the bar, and this thing's sticking off at right angles, makes it very difficult to forge.
And this is going to become...
That is the hook.
The hook.
Yes,
and
we're
this...
going to draw that out. That's the spike.
Right, okay. And this is the cut that we just made here, correct? Okay.
Yes.
And this corner here was made from the angle iron that we had on the vise.
Quite correct, yes.
Okay. Now I'm seeing a little bit of
Yeah, lipping and cupping, I call that. Yeah. Not worried about it, but I wouldn't like it to be much more than that. You're right. It's a red flag, isn't it? We all know that. But I think I can get around that at this stage.
Okay. Okay. Next.
Here's my convenience bend. So I started it one way, and I've just turned the bar over. So the bar on the bottom of the slide going out to the right is my parent bar, and the bit that the hammer's touching now is the spike.
Okay.
That's the spike. Yeah.
This is the
There's
hook.
the hook.
And that's the parent.
bar. Yeah.
All right.
So you can see now it puts the hook into more of a forging plane. And so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to forge it. I choose to draw tapers over the bit because I find that it's a little more efficient. And so I'm going to draw that down. And we should have roughly a 2-inch length there. If we shouldered in at 3 inches and shouldered in an inch, that should be 2 inches of material. And I'm going to try and draw that to about 4 inches.
Now, tell us why you think it's more efficient to forge over the bick.
Ah, yes. Are you familiar with the cow poop theory of blacksmithing?
No.
Okay, then I'll tell you. Yeah, so we have a pile of cow poop, fresh, of course, and you jump into it with both feet. Where's it going to go? 360 degrees. So if you are forging your hot material, let's call it the cow poop, on the flat face of the anvil with the flat face of your hammer, where's it going to go? 360 degrees out. Well, I don't want that. I actually want to draw along a taper. So if I come back to my cow poop and I hit the cow poop with, I guess, a baseball bat over here. I was going to say a cricket bat. I hit it with a baseball bat. Where's the poop going to go? It's going to go either side of the arc of the bat, so 180 degrees as opposed to 360. So now we've got directional control. So I'm treating the bick as the bat, if you will. So I'm driving the poop onto the bat as opposed to the bat into the poop. But so I've got directional control of the material. It will go longer with marginal gain in width as opposed to everything gaining in equal size if I work on the face.
Fantastic. Excellent explanation. Next.
So here I'm just dressing it. Now I've moved to the flat face of the anvil because I don't want the sort of indents that I get drawing on the bick. So when I get close, I can move to the face. I've got a nice taper there. It's not super sharp. I don't want the hook super sharp because that's going to annoy the miner. Sometimes they dangle this on their hat. So this is actually the first headlamp. The hook would be sometimes hooked on the front of their cap, and they would walk in the mines just wearing it like a headlamp.
I think I researched and found out that some of the hats had a little grommet hole for these hooks.
That's right, all sorts of things. But again, you don't want it super sharp to dig holes in it, so don't draw it down to the nth degree. Leave it, I think I'm going to say a 16th of an inch or something like that, square at the end. So again, it's not super sharp.
Okay. Now, this, then, we're saying is hopefully around 4 inches long, then.
Yeah, and I'm getting there. If you look at my anvil, and the anvil's going to be around about 4 inches, so I think we're about right there, yeah.
Okay.
And again, you know, this has to go out the door for a certain amount of money, so I'm not a slave to these measurements, but I know roughly what my measurements are on my anvil, so I can work quickly.
Sure. Okay. Next slide.
Well, the important thing for me is you notice I'm protecting the transition to the hook by putting it over the radius edge of the near side edge of the anvil there. That's right, exactly. And now I'm just going to drop my tong hand with the parent stock as I'm hitting the spike, and I'm going to straighten out my convenience bend. And notice now I'm starting to forge that. So that gap that you commented on when we were at the vise, that's going away now.
It sure is, right here.
Yeah. It's starting to look straight, isn't it? And you notice we've got some nice gentle transitions there as we work over the near side and the offside edge of the anvil.
Right. Okay.
And now we're going to draw down the taper. Actually, I think you've got forging the hook there, and we've finished the hook. This is on the spike.
Oh, right. Okay.
So I'm just dressing it there. And I would, again, probably move to the bick if I had a lot of work to do. The difficult thing here now is that we're dealing with, both with the hook and with this spike, we're dealing with material that has been split. Therefore, it has a chamfer in it. If I hold it flat on the anvil and just hit it with the flat face of my hammer, it will corkscrew, as that chamfer gets hit.
Right.
So you're obliged to somewhat hold the material at an angle, so you're hitting across the corners, and then as you hit gently to get rid of the chamfer, then you can rotate the material back into square. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes. So you're actually putting, let's say, this bottom corner actually on the face of the anvil so that you're hitting on this top corner in order to chamfer.
Absolutely. Yeah, and then you roll it into square as the chamfer goes away.
To avoid the corkscrew. Okay.
That's right. It's another one of those teaching opportunities.
Now, how long is this spike?
Well, you have a number of variations here. So some of the spikes I've seen are parallel for quite a ways and then have a blunt taper on the end. Some of them, like mine, taper right from their root. So about 6 inches for me, and mine taper right from the hook. If you want a different look, then you're going to have to play around with the measurements initially.
Next slide.
Now all I'm doing is I'm getting the hook out of the way because I want to put this into the fire. I'm dealing with a coal fire at this stage, and I don't want this hook, which is sticking out like a sore thumb, interfering with the fire or getting burnt or whatever. So I'm just trying to get it out of the way. Again, don't make it a super sharp bend because you're going to have to straighten this up later. And anything that's super sharp will crack as you open it out. So it has to be a nice, gentle bend.
Fantastic. Wow, these were very... This is a lot. This is so interesting. I love all of these techniques, and it's a bunch of shouldering and upsetting for corners.
Exactly, and that's what this thing is all about for me. So these corners do not have to be there. This is my own little rendition. And again, it was the game I wanted to play. So these could just be normal bent bar, no problems at all. So if you're feeling like you don't want to do the corners, maybe it's just a little beyond where you want to be at this stage, then leave them. We can come back to them at another time. But I wanted them. I wanted to work out my measurements, my forgings, etc. So it was just a game that I wanted to play. And I've numbered the corners there. You can see 1, 2, and 3. And we're going to refer to them as that as we go through. Okay, so now we're going to start with which corner are we going to work with? That is the corner number 1. I'm just showing you the idea, what I'm trying to achieve. So you have a number of ways of creating an upset corner. I'm not going to say square corner. Square corner to me means 90 degrees, so I'm going to try and call them upset corners. Okay. So you can draw away material and leave and isolate a little spike, as I've done just there. Or I could upset the material as I make my bend a little later. So that seems to me problematic. So I'm going to, I've already have the material. That peak, if you like, is the increase in width that we got as we shouldered in earlier on. That's why we left it. Oh, that's yes. Increase in width. Yeah, and that's where it starts to be kind of fun. We had it there anyway, so why not use it? Okay. So the orientation is important. You notice I've got the bent hook is actually the hook, should we say, is pointing right towards here. The bick. Yeah. So if you go to the root of that, it's pointing to the bick. That's right. I've laid off about 1 inch between the arrows, and I'm going to draw that down to, let's call it, it's going to be a fat 1/4 inch. So I want to say 1/4 inch. 1/4 inch probably looks a little weedy. 5/16 looks a little heavy. So somewhere in there, I'm sure the mathematicians will tell us that's 932 or something like that. I don't talk in those numbers because I can't even see them on my rule. Yeah, right. But a fat 1/4 inch will be just fine. Okay. And you can see I've set it down and I'm starting to work it on that lower slide. And you can see already it looks like it's grown a little bit. And you've noticed that the bit that's hanging off the edge of the anvil is 1/2 of that peak of material for my upset corner. Next slide. What is this? And this is me forging the other bit. So this is off the offside edge now. You can't see the peak of material that's pointing away from us, but we're just correcting the growth and drawing it down to that fat 1/4 inch, so square. So the big thing for me is that anything that is I'm going to call it a pretty, anything that sticks up, I generally put down away. As I was growing up, I was always told, look at where you're hitting, son, look at where you're hitting. And so if ever I have a pretty thing, I'm looking at it to make sure I don't hit it. And what have I done my whole life? Look at where you're hitting, look at where you're hitting. So I'm going to hit it. I know I'm going to hit it. So I just get it out of the way. If I can, I point it down. Let's just get it right out the way. Okay. And this gives me also the opportunity to dress that transition area of the hook to the spike. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, over a nice gentle radius of the anvil.
Yeah, those have to be pretty exact hits in order not to bend the rest of this down.
Right, but we're coming back later. So, again, you know, if the better you are, the better your result. And if you're getting frustrated at this stage because it's not going well, this is a learning opportunity. Now, the other thing is, if you don't have the edges that I have on my anvil, let's suppose you have an older anvil that's not repaired as yet, then you can make an anvil block. And you can either forge it, as I would do, or you can fabricate it, get a block of steel, let's say a 2-inch square bar or something, cut off a couple of inches and weld a bit of angle iron on the bottom. And then you can grind on the edges that you want, and then that can work in the hardy hole. So you can find your edges even if you don't have them on your anvil per se.
Great idea. Okay.
I carry one of those with me when I demonstrate on a 1-inch hardy hole because I never know the condition of the anvil that I'm going to be working on. And so if I'm finding that I am frustrated with the anvil and it's got a 1-inch hardy hole, I can just drop that in. If it doesn't have a 1-inch hardy hole, I can put it in the vise and I can work in the vise. Same thing. It's a useful tool, the anvil block.
Next slide. Let's talk about this.
So now I'm trying to isolate the material. Now I'm trying to finish that peak of material that will be my upset corner. And this is important. You'll notice that the shoulder of that corner is hard up against the edge of my anvil. I've not laid it off by pushing it out beyond the anvil. That's really important. I want a nice sharp corner when forged. If I push it out a little bit, I'll end up with a blunt corner. Not insurmountable, just more work. So again, it has to go out the door for a certain amount of time. That's it. So that corner there has to be in line with the edge of the anvil. That's right there. Yes.
Okay.
And you might want to try a couple of these, you know, just on a bit of scrap bar, just to make sure you can line it up before you start dealing with something you've already got some time invested in.
Right. And what we're doing here is
just drawing down to our fat 1/4 inch, shy 5/16, whatever square.
To match this.
That's correct.
Okay. Oh, there it is. Okay.
There it is, exactly. And so we set it down, and then whilst I've got the heat in the bar, I'm going to draw as much as I can. And we're going to come back later to finish this off. But I'm going to draw as much as I can of the material behind that peak down to our fat 1/4 inch as I can. And then I've got a choice. Then I can either heat further down the bar, or I can turn the bar around. Typically at this stage, I turn the bar around and work off the other end. Now, the caveat is, of course, I'm working in a solid fuel forge, and so my heat lengths are quite specific. Whereas if you work in a gas forge, maybe you can work a little further down the bar than I can.
Down here, right.
Yeah,
okay.
Right.
And this will become whatever it is, whatever length it is, to get it down to that fat 1/4 inch.
Right, and so my measurements allow me, hopefully, that will draw down to about, let's call it that fat 1/4 inch, and it should be 6 inches between the corners. If you do the math, so if you compare, let's say that was 1/4 inch square. If that was 1/4 inch square and you're comparing the volume to 3/4 by 1/4 bar, I think you would need, including going to the base of the hook, the material in the upset eye, and then the 6 inches between, etc. So that whole material, if you went with 1/4 inch, you'd need 3 inches of parent stock, I think. If you went with 932, which I am, you're going to need 4 inches. And if you went with 5/16, you'd probably need 5 inches. So you can see, you know, with these small measurements, it can really make a difference in how much parent material you lay off between.
Absolutely. That's a lot, a whole inch.
That's a lot, and you're only talking a 1/16 of an inch per side. You
right,
know?
right.
So I sort of ballpark it as 932, let's say the fat 1/4 inch. So I said that's, as far as the math goes, the perfect world, that says it's going to be about 4 inches of material, and I think I made 4 1/4 between my two marks on the anvil. So I've given myself a little bit of room there for, one, scaling, because that always, you know, takes away some material, especially in a gas forge. So if you've got a gas forge, you might want to just add a little bit. So it gives me room, a margin for error, and I'm big into margins for error.
Right. Now, why did you just say that in a gas forge there's more scaling than a coal forge?
Well, you have more free oxygen roaming around, and so you're going to have more scaling typically in a gas forge than you will in a coal forge. It's funny, there's a lot of things that we do, a heat. I believe that most of the heat that we take above 1400 degrees, which is what, a sort of higher red, is through radiation. Not necessarily hot gases. And the gases are certainly adding to it, but it's radiation heat. So it's funny what goes on inside a forge.
Right. Now, I think we're ready to go on to the next slide. Is that right?
Yes.
I think
we've finished on this end, I think, and we're going to turn the bar around, and we're going to cut it at the 9-inch mark. Yes, there we are. So you can see. Now, the purist here, I'm not saying the purist, you notice I've got no sacrificial plate under my chisel at the top left slide.
Right.
And technically I should, and it would be certainly recommended, but I do this cut, God, how many times a day? I don't know. And so I cut, I'm watching not where the chisel is in the material, I'm watching the daylight under the edge of the chisel at the edge of the stock. And I'm going to cut down till I have about a 1/16 of an inch or so. Then I move to the edge of the anvil, as in top right, and I make my severance cut. But technically, it would be nice, especially if you're just starting, put a little sacrificial plate underneath the stock as you make that first cut.
Okay, great.
And then the bottom one, you remember how we were talking about you could lengthen the fullering of the bick? That's it. That's the bick area there. And I can come in and shoulder down and not worry about creating a cold shut. If I'd made a hard set transition in that area and I needed to take another bite of it, I'd make a cold shut. So that's the advantage of forging that bit over the bick.
Right. Okay, and then this, we're wanting to be how long?
I think it's 1 3/4 inches. We've already made a mark. The bit that's right on the edge of the anvil is your 7 1/4 inch mark that we marked off earlier.
Right here.
Right there.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Next slide is showing that shouldering at that mark.
That's right. So I'd come in again, draw it down to the 5/16 or so. Do not correct for the growth in width. We're going to use that for a couple more of those upset corners.
Which is around here.
That's right.
Okay.
And we're going to draw that down and just make it parallel if you can.
BlacksmitHer Radio, forging blacksmiths together.